I'm so excited to host Nick Vasquez. He's a medical doctor, chess improver, the writer of the beautiful blog that is titled Chess in Small Doses. I've been following his blog for a long time. He's been to the Perpetual Chess Podcast a couple of times. So I'm super excited to learn his stories, also his approach to chess learning in terms of cognitive science, but also working memory, visualization. We'll be talking about all these beautiful things that will be very helpful for adult improvers, also for chess coaches as a whole. Very welcome to the show, Nick.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, I mean, as you know, I've been following lots of blogs myself to catch on what's going on there, and your blog really attracted my attention. Also, your post on Twitter and so on, because you were definitely trying to, let's say, break the code of chess improvement by your insights, also from science. You made a Make It Stick episode with Ben Johnson, that beautiful
Yeah.
book about learning science. Super interesting, by the way. I recommend to every one of you guys to listen to that episode. So it was always in my mind, Nick, to invite to this show. And
I
yeah,
think I think it's just you and what, Christopher Chabris are the cognitive scientists and who actually play chess.
yeah,
Maybe there's more, but I think you guys bring such a fascinating approach from the cognitive science, watching brains struggle to kind of make sense of chess.
right.
I'm really happy that you're part of it.
Yeah, it's also super interesting because you're an adult improver yourself. You've been to those stages. You, let's say, started chess again maybe in 2020, maybe like 4 years ago to take it seriously, and you actually improved a lot by using the step method. And then you have some plateaus, let's say, at some point, but then you broke some barriers by doing some visualization training specifically. So that's also the key, one of the key questions to me today. Like, what was that key breakthrough, and how do you sort of see yourself over time as an improver player? We'll be talking about those key aspects of chess improvement today, like step by step.
Yeah,
But
a lot
very
to say
briefly,
there.
Nick, your rating is currently, can you tell us a bit about your rating, your current rating?
Yeah, so I started playing it on chess.com. I'm currently 1650, and then when I got serious, I switched over to Lichess and
Hmm.
took part of the Lichess 45-45 League. I'm currently 19, what am I? 1913 classical Lichess.
Hmm.
And then my USCF is 1502. Two sisters, man, they just wiped the floor with me the last time I got a tournament.
Right.
But those that's the numbers right now where I stand. I hope that if I were to get back to a USCF tournament, I would do better and gain some points back because I've made a lot of progress lately.
Right. And I've been, of course, following your blog, Chess in Small Doses. I especially like that part where you were discussing, those hardcore drills that you were making. I guess it was step number two because you were following the step method, right, from the start, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so long story short, I tried to teach my daughter chess, and she just did
Mhm.
not like Daddy's teaching style at all. And I
Like it.
loved the work at chess. I had never actually used the chess steps. I bought them for her, but then
Right.
I found all of a sudden I liked them. So I started going through chess step one and chess step two. I listened to Ben Johnson's interview with one of the authors of chess steps,
Right.
and then that's also how I came across Han Schutt,
Right.
who's a coach with the chess steps. But
Hmm.
in in writing my blog of chess in small doses, I'm trying to understand what did I go through, what's the experience. I'm trying to process it, and I wrote a series called Simpler Chess, where ask some questions, and I started coming across the way that cognitive science seems to show how our perception is flawed. There's that famous study of the basketball team, and the invisible gorilla comes
Invisible
in.
Gorilla by
Yeah, yeah,
Chabri,
yeah,
actually, by
yeah,
the Christopher
yeah,
Chabri.
yeah.
Yes.
So I kind of used that, but it whetted my appetite. And then in sort of looking into that, I looked back at what happened with chess steps because by the end of Chess Steps 2, they have this thinking ahead booklet,
Hmm.
which was unique. I had never had anybody kind of explain to me or give me puzzles on how to think ahead. And the whole booklet was just sort of trying to anticipate or visualize or see, okay, where are the squares that are controlled? How are you going to mate? How are you going to do this? Um, and it occurred to me recently that I think kids do this just automatically. I think
Hmm.
young improvers just automatically do this. And the ones that can do that are the ones that get past the initial challenge of chess and start to excel and learn because they can visualize.
Right.
And I know that as an adult, this is not a natural thing. This isn't just something that
Mm,
happened. So with chess steps 2 visualization, I went back and I looked, just going from step 1, step 2, and then finishing up step 2, thinking ahead before I met my coach. I jumped 150 points.
only by
I
doing
went
that visualization
by
part.
that.
Wow.
Yeah, but that 150 points, I remember the feeling very much afterwards that after steps 2, thinking ahead, I felt like I could see. All of a sudden,
Mm,
I could go, oh, wait, all right, so there's a vulnerable square over there, or man, well, if I go here, what's going to happen there? All of a sudden,
mm,
I could kind of see ahead, whereas before, I think it's fair to say I was just pushing, pushing pieces around, going, well, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen there?
aha.
The the number of times I got surprised by moves before that, it was just a lot. But real chess is really about going through this process of anticipating not only what is in my move, but anticipating what your opponent can do and then what you're going to do
Mm,
in response. And I know that sounds weird, but I'd never really done that until somebody told me to do it with steps 2 thinking ahead, where they
interesting.
kind of give you these challenges to kind of visualize what's going to happen ahead of time.
So, can you tell us a bit about about those exercises specifically? As far as I remember, you're seeing a chessboard position, and then they are giving you certain moves. For example, yeah, black plays e3, then you will see a move for white without you seeing the
You
actual move.
have, yeah, you have all of that. So they'll give you
Yeah,
a position and they'll give you 3 or 4 moves and then go, what's the best move for black? Right?
right.
Or they'll give you a set of coordinates where the pieces are without the board and
Aha,
ask you what's the best move for, for white or for one side or the other.
right.
But it's just step again, this process of just kind of trying to visualize or trying to see. All
Without
right,
moving the
so
pieces.
if,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I know that sounds well, it sounds weird to me that I had never done it before, but I'd never done it before. I've
Right.
been
I
thought I'd
try
been
to
playing
understand
chess,
because
but not
you were
really.
solving tactical puzzles. You were doing puzzle rush. You were doing normal puzzles, right? At the same time as you were doing that, like there's
Yeah, but
something addition to normal puzzles that you solve
I mean,
basically.
if you go all the way back to when I kind of first got into chess, as a kid, I was into chess, but I didn't really play it. And then so I started playing people when I was in residency. I bought books. I read Silman's Amateur Mind. I tried to do a lot of things, and it was like a foreign language. I couldn't speak the language. I had no idea what
Right.
they were talking about. All I remember from the Amateur Mind was him saying, "Well, most amateurs keep playing the same game," and I think that's what I was doing
Right.
because I couldn't really see past like, well, I know I'm playing a Sicilian here, or I do this there, and it was really damn frustrating. I'm not going to lie, it was really
Mm,
frustrating,
mm,
which then made me really want to do better when the
right.
pandemic came around.
Right. That's super interesting. So a couple of thoughts there because we will be talking about pattern accumulation and chunks and so on later on. But already when it comes to visualization, like I think one reason this course, fundamental calculation skills of mine on Chessable got the award is that's totally about those three ply visualizations, short
Yeah,
calculations that I was asking people to do. Yeah. Because to me, calculation involves you see visualizing move sequences basically, yeah, move sequences, not only your move that I will do this and see what happens, but I'm only asking for three ply, shortest possible line to calculate, which involves you see a move for yourself, actively search for the best for the opponent, and you see your response, hence three ply, right? Only stop there. You do it, if you do it properly in a three ply context, you get all the right tools for calculation, then you can go deeper later on. But I always stop in three ply because of that, because of the overload, cognitive overload that will take place probably for many right beginners and amateurs and so on. So this
yeah,
was
yeah,
the basic
yeah.
thought of this
Oh,
of this
no,
course.
I think it's really good because there's this one book, what was it, Studying Chess Made Easy by Andy Soltis, who said the same thing. You're
Right.
going to go a move and a half, 1.5 moves. Your move, their move, your move.
Yeah.
This is kind of how you do it. But my experience, and I'll give it to you, my experience is that pardon the phrase, the hoi polloi, everybody else who's out there thinking that they're playing chess doesn't do that. The vast majority of people
Yeah.
don't have the ability to visualize and aren't calculating a move and a half. They just think it's really
Mm,
cool and they want to play it. This the intuition says, "Oh, I just want to go there. Oh boy, I just gave up mate and one." Uh,
right.
I think the vast majority of people, if they focus on that process, can actually overcome some of this frustration and gain the skill. But the skill is conceptualizing or visualizing a board and seeing pieces move without touching them. That's not a skill that just automatically happens for a lot of people. Some people who have talent just bam, acquire it. And they're like, oh, why didn't you see that? You didn't see three moves ahead? Look at that. There was a pin there.
Right.
Um, I feel like for a lot of beginners, that work, that first work of being able to see pieces move without moving them is so essential that I feel
Right.
like the people who are talented at chess just miss that that's a skill to acquire at all.
Yeah. That's why I invite you today, because I'm a chess master myself. It was a long time ago, right? I probably passed that process. And it of
Yeah.
course comes naturally to me, right? Obviously, you
Yeah.
see certain sequences. It's also about chunking, of course, because I learned so many chunks patterns. Then it also becomes more efficient, basically, right? You have intuition about certain moves, and you don't need to sometimes calculate that long, and you start to see the whole board, basically, because of your chunking mechanisms and so on. Obviously, expertise also helps when it comes to not overwhelming the resources of working memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when it comes
Yeah.
to this, that's an interesting thought. So your observation is that it's like, what is it called? Pareto principle, like 20% of what you do determines 80% of the outcomes, right?
Yes.
So your idea is that it's actually this visualization training itself that you should do
I,
consciously. That explains.
I think so because we live in a modern time since I suppose since Gutenberg. I was just reading about this. The Gutenberg Bible comes around, and all of a sudden, people are inundated with information from books, from pieces of paper, and we're all overwhelmed. Ever since the internet came around, because I'm old enough to remember before Google, we have been awash in information. The problem that we all have is we don't have relevancy to which information we need to pay attention to or not. And for a beginner, everything seemed relevant. Oh, I should look at this line. I should
Right.
look at that opening. I should look at this. I could look at that. And the overwhelm of options, it's really hard for any beginner to stay on a course,
Yeah.
ignore the other things, turn them all down, and only work on this initial skill that will enable everything else. I'm
Right.
so grateful for Steps Method that they did that for me. In that that was the only book that I was working on at the time, and that was the only skill I was working on creating. So if any amateur or coach of amateurs is out there struggling to make improvement, I strongly recommend you ignore everything else and go
Interesting.
back to just this simple visualization stuff. Our memories are really good. Our long-term memory is really good at retaining every single detail that we experience every single day. But our our working memory and our
Yes.
hippocampus, the part of the brain that sort of signifies emotionally relevant memories, if it's not emotionally relevant for you, your brain is like meh. So you can drill patterns all day long, but if it's not something that's meaningful to you, you're not going to retain it.
Right.
I think, the reasons that people, I don't think, progress just on pattern recognition alone is their brain's not flavoring it like an important piece of information. It's something that they feel they should remember, but it's not something personal. To change subjects, but to highlight the same point, there was a gentleman who was autistic who tried to write what it felt like for him to deal with numbers, and seven was like the fall and the color orange, and five was like a cool winter day, like they were just vivid for him because he had that experience in that relationship with numbers, and so numbers were really interesting for him, and very that's the way his brain worked. Your brain, my brain, is not going to remember things unless it's meaningful for me, unless
Right.
I'm interested in it. And you're not going to get interested in that unless you either lose or win a game that's meaningful to you based upon that
Yeah.
pattern. You can drill
Yeah.
patterns all you want,
Yeah.
but
This is going to
that
be such an
connection.
interesting subject today, Nick, because we were about to talk about the productive failure and how it got
Yeah.
support from science. That's actually one of the key questions that I want to ask you today, because you also wrote about this, right? This segment of, what is the best way to learn, also when it comes to any domains, but also chess, right? One school of thought says it's about direct instruction. You just basically bombard students with lots of patterns. You teach them patterns, and you even teach them the solutions, right steps to the solutions, and so on. And they are passively absorbing the information. They claim that cognitive overload doesn't take place, right? because when the students are left alone, then working memory is overwhelmed. So that's a basic argument for direct instruction, by the way. It also gets some support from other domains. It's not like a terrible idea, right? So you give them information, all these important patterns and chunks. Hopefully a coach can select those important recurrent patterns and chunks to be taught. But then, as you said, there's also this productive failure approach to things. They claim it's not enough. You need testing, personal crafting, going into the world, trying, failing, and only then, once you learn it after that failure stage, it sticks even more. It sticks even more. It becomes personal. It's like a scar. We were having a group session today. We discussed this actually. One of my students agreed fully, and he said he only remembers if information is burned to his brain by a personal loss. It's like a scar, he told me. It's like a war scar. I lost a terrible game, and then it sticks much better in his brain, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, our brains are built for an uncertain world with scarcity, and they really don't want to spend a lot of information and a lot of energy to process things unless it's for a darn good reason. Your mind will wander or wander off, or will try to not retain that information unless it's for a darn good reason. And if you lose a game painfully to the Greek gift, you will remember the Greek gift, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If you lose a game because you drop a piece that you were winning, and I've done that. I gave up a
Yeah,
mate and won. I had a game that I was going to win, and I gave up a mate and won.
it really hurt.
These oh
You never
still
forget.
hurts. I'm still so mad. But I want to go to what you talked about with direct instruction.
Yeah.
And personally, my sense is when I wrote these two articles and when I read Make It Stick, um, I learned that I think direct instruction is good when you already have an idea of what game you're trying to play. But
Mm,
if you take a beginner and you give them direct instruction, you're going to give them instruction for a world that is not going to be what they encounter. They're going to encounter an uncertain world that is
mm,
different than what you give them. All right, control the center,
mm-hmm.
try and develop, get your pieces, blah, blah, blah. They're going to face these random, uncertain moves and
Right.
they won't understand because it's
Mm,
not direct instructions that's telling them, okay, well, you want to develop here. Well, your opponent made a mistake, so you take care of it this way. How the heck do you take care of, you take advantage of somebody's mistake is a skill. And
yes.
it's not something that people kind of go over unless they understand the concepts.
Mm,
I think the first couple of skills for beginners, you got to be able to visualize. And then when I wrote the second piece that you mentioned, because I wrote two pieces on how to become a master. It was a review of a book by Andy
Soltis.
Soltis,
Yes.
yeah, what it takes to become a chess master. So the first one is I'm underwhelmed by the impact of just doing tactics, tactics, tactics if you don't visualize. You got to be able to visualize first, and after that, and
Mm,
then things will go. And my own experience, both with steps two and then recently doing visualization work, is that I've had a lot of success from that. I've had a lot of improvement in my ability to play the game. The other thing, once you get past that, once you want to then go and try and move past just beginner stages, the only way that I believe that the information becomes relevant to you, becomes sticky, is by failing. You
mm,
try and you fail. And when you fail, now you're very motivated to understand why did I fail. And then a coach can be very helpful with a pattern. Oh, well, you missed this pattern. I mean, and I'm going to take a little issue with Chessable.
mm.
And I don't mean to go at, the sponsors or your courses or
No, no.
anything like that. Your courses are great. But I find that Chessable is one of those things that distracts beginners from the actual work that they need to do to get better.
Mm,
And there's a chess entertainment complex out there, just like there's a media complex out there that wants and needs your attention. There is a competition for everyone's eyeballs and attention out there.
mm-hmm,
And the
mm-hmm.
more they garner the attention, the more that they make money. All I'm saying is that if you really want to play, then play. If you want to play better, play, get some instructions, and then try again. It's really unfortunate, but just drilling openings, even if you're 100% accurate, is going to get you what? Move 15?
Mm.
You've still got 25 moves left,
Of course.
on average.
Of course.
And you've got what? An equal position because you remembered 15 moves of theory?
Hmm.
All in all, you'll probably be better off with the limited time that you have working on simple mate and twos or simple, 1 to 2 move tactics, and just start to work on that kind of ability to see these things on the board in the game. It's no matter how many times I drilled the Caro-Kann or I drilled, whatever opening I was going to play, I would inevitably forget one.
Mm.
And that means I had to switch my openings to openings that were a little more forgiving.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, yeah. We
Yeah.
discussed this recently with Banner, like the whole concept for beginners, lifetime repertoires, are they useful for them? Right, intent of the teacher, I think, is the key. The intent of the teacher, it has to be relevant for the student's current level as well. I think that's the key determinant of any education psychology practice. Like the biggest determinant of success of an education is the current level of the student, and all material should be should be thought about like that, right? Like just
Yeah.
not to
Yeah. Yeah.
overwhelm them and give them something that is so important as well. But also, having said that, chessable also has so many other courses when it comes to, let's say tactics or basic patterns, checkmate patterns, even some beginner courses. So there's material out there, but I understand
Yeah.
your concern when it comes to this overemphasis, yeah, this idea that it's openings mostly that will
I mean,
decide your
if
games.
you're John Bartholomew and you practice, the Scandi, you're going to remember a lot of it because you've played thousands of games in the Scandi, right? You'll have one particular move. The game I played earlier today, I was playing a Slav against the Queen's Gambit, and I wasn't sure where am I supposed to put the bishop, and I ended up going bishop g4, which actually worked out pretty well. And then I had to check my reference, and that's the move that they recommended. So okay, good for me. But that was the extent of my knowledge. At that point, I was on my own.
Hmm.
And we're like, what, move five? You can do chessable all you want, and you can stay in that educational environment. But
Yeah,
adults often will try to study, 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 study,
overdo it.
study,
Yeah, yeah,
and the
yeah.
skill is failing first.
I recently talked to Solvay Freeberg, by the way, the rookie redhead, exactly about
Yeah.
this topic we touched. And that's also what's her basic point, that chess players, adult improvers, are going for the academic route. They are studying too much, all these crazy repertoires, but they are missing out on the
Yeah.
craftsmanship, on the skill of trying, playing, getting your hands dirty, and
Yeah, yeah,
learning
yeah,
from
yeah,
your
yeah.
mistakes, right? I
Yeah.
think we are really following that. And this productive failure is the key, I think. And it gets support from scientific evidence. It usually leads to better transfer, especially for complex domains, like in other domains as well. When the task is complex, open-ended, multiple solutions, usually you see better transfer. You like deeper conceptual understanding takes place mostly. When you have the hands-on approach first, you fail. But of course, instructional design also is important, right? You must get good feedback after your failures.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Thus,
yeah.
only trying, only playing blitz, only playing all your life is also probably a wrong approach. You need good guidance. You need to seek the right feedback after you fail.
It's this really hard thing for adults, but Harris, my coach, Ian
Yeah.
Harris, he had me stop playing rapid games. He only wanted
Aha.
me to play the longer classical games,
Okay.
and he's like 1 or 2 a week at best, but really want you to get into that place where you stop and you think for 5 or 10 minutes. It's not a natural thing for me. It's
Aha.
I'm a fast decision maker. I like, okay,
Yeah.
let's go. I
Intuitive.
end up, yeah, but I end up playing too fast for the position. So I'm having to
Mm,
teach myself to
to
slow
slow down.
down,
Yeah.
right? And to really kind of think about it. That's my, truth be told, that's my biggest
It's so
problem
hard. It's
is
so hard.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I'm like, oh God, can I just move? Please, can I just move? But um, each one of us will have blockages
Mm,
to progress, and if you don't try and fail, you won't know where that block is. You'll spend a lot of time over on another area. And so, in our conversation prior to this podcast, we had talked
mm.
a little bit about Manny Rivers and sepsis from my world.
Yes.
And when I was in residency in around the year 2000, 2001, a groundbreaking research study was published about treatment of sepsis, which at the
Yes.
time was not really well known. And Manny Rivers, with a group of people at Detroit Receiving, because their ER was overwhelmed and would hold on to people for days, they experimented with a lot of different ways to treat sepsis and dropped mortality by over 30%. That's unheard of in modern medicine.
Right.
Just absolutely unheard of. But it involved really, really intense sort of like protocol of put this line here, put that line there, measure this over 4 hours, do this intervention if it doesn't get better. It was all this goal-directed therapy.
Hmm.
And over about 20 years of my career, it has been whittled away from you must do all of this to the only two benefits that have stood up to repeat examination are the doctor considered sepsis
Right.
and the doctor treated sepsis. That was it.
Aha. That was
Doesn't
it.
need a line, doesn't need to measure this, doesn't need to measure that, just needs to get antibiotics early. And the only way that you do that is by you have it in your
Ah.
mind, you go, could this be sepsis? Back to chess improvement.
Right. How does it relate?
There, right, there are more books written on chess each year than any other sport. It is an
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming options for many beginners.
Correct.
And they don't need 99% of them.
Hmm.
They need to focus on skill acquisition.
Hmm.
That comes with playing, failing, and trying again. Coaches are really helpful there. Opening book resources are really helpful there. But don't study the chessable course first. Play, lose, go back and go, oh, that's why that move sucks. Okay,
Interesting.
now I'll remember that. But
Interesting.
it's only if you lose or if you win, you kind of understand these games that you will start to retain it. Your brain will convince you, oh, I'm doing productive chess work. But unless you can talk about it like it's a person or like it's a real thing, your brain's not going to hold on to it. It just, boop,
Yeah.
lost.
It's so interesting because this was exactly this, because there's no scientific evidence yet on this, and that was exactly your point. We need more scientific evidence
Yeah.
on this particular issue, right? Evidence-based methods of chess improvement. And yes, that's still, we need more effort, more resources, more money
Yeah.
to pursue such projects. We were almost going to apply, by the way, for this very project with Fernand Gobet, international master from London.
Yeah.
He's like
Yeah.
the god of chess research. I talked to him like for a whole year. We finally found this project to be the most promising, right? Comparing direct instruction, productive failure, and pure discovery learning, right? Completely unstructured. You only play and no one is even helping you. You're supposed to figure out what went wrong. You're supposed to figure out
Well,
using an engine, whatever, right? Comparing those three techniques. We need many humans. We need so much time. And in the end, life kicked in. We couldn't apply for the project. But
yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
interesting to
I
see
mean,
whether it actually works.
for everybody who just like plays and kind of gets it, like what Tyler won or whatever, he just started playing and just learns. The majority of us think differently. Brains are really interesting. Some brains recognize faces, some brains don't. Some brains see color, some brains don't. Every brain will be different because there's a wide variety of people. But the hard part for me, because I speak so certainly, and I want to put some humility here. You mentioned it. There's not a lot of evidence. There's a lot of thought. I think this is the case, but
Hmm.
chess improvement is the land of opinions.
Yes.
Everybody's got an opinion,
Yes.
and not everybody's got data. And I include myself in that. I have an N of
Mm-hmm.
one, but
Mm-hmm.
my experience makes me feel like this is the right way. But that's called consensus statement, which is a majority of what medicine is we all get together and decide this sounds about right. We think
Right.
this is about right, right?
Right. Right.
I always like to joke that medicine is like giving somebody a medium shirt and then trying to make sure it fits better after we put it on.
Mm.
Because we're treating towards the average. I give everyone 325 milligrams of aspirin, or I give everyone 650 milligrams of Tylenol. Doesn't matter how big they are. That's the
Mm.
dose they get. And yet on my own, I can understand that's probably not right.
Right.
Right, but this is what we all do, so you don't shy away from the consensus. What do we all
Right.
do? We study patterns, we do tactics, we do all of this stuff in chess because that's
Mm.
what everybody else does. And I,
Mm.
I just find there is this huge need for better data
Sure.
and less stories.
Sure. That's
Even though
exactly
I'm a
what we need.
storyteller. Yeah,
Yeah, that's exactly what we need more. Like, given chess is the most written domain in terms of published
yeah,
books, we need more evidence, scientific evidence, actually, just to have more data, just to have different approaches to this whole conundrum of chess improvement and so on. It will be interesting, yeah, to get that data also on the table. And
I'm sorry you didn't get to do your study.
Yeah, I mean, he got very busy. I got very busy with my life translations and so on. But we have the idea in mind. Maybe in the future we can still apply for that. The thought is there. Maybe some other person can apply for it because I think that's it. Also, that research will benefit not only chess but also education psychology. If you think about that, because chess is a perfect domain to test these hypotheses because it's a closed system. You can measure the
Yeah.
performance
Yeah, you can measure the
objectively, right?
outcomes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
beautiful game to actually explore those education because even if you look at education psychology, people cannot agree on anything, right? Like there are these supporters of different approaches and the constant debates basically. So they also need more data and they could be
You
used
know,
also.
my sense
Yeah.
of it, having watched doctors get educated, having been educated, my sense of it is that all of it works a little, but not reliably. Like, could you get better if all you did was tactics, tactics, tactics? Well, you got the woodpecker method, and somebody said, yeah, I was, got my GM norms that way. Okay, great. But a majority of people find that really intrusive, right? Really difficult to do. Could you get better just watching videos? Some people have. They watch a bunch of videos, they get a sense of a style that somebody's playing with, and maybe they've improved that way. Could you get better just going and playing OTB games and reviewing them with a coach? Absolutely. You can get better any which way you want. The hard part is how much better do you get? How fast do you get better? And how much effort does it require? My own experience, 4 years that I've been doing this intensely, is my greatest gains have come with working on the skill that I think I didn't have initially, which was conceptualization or visualization. If you've already got that, maybe it'll help, maybe not. But
Right.
my experience, having done tactics, having done opening, having done chessable courses, lifetime courses, having played OTB, all of these things, my greatest gains have come when working on conceptualization. That's my story.
And then you reached a plateau or something, or you stopped simply working on conceptualization. Like, can you tell us about that? Like, did you
Yeah.
keep on
So
working on that?
steps works very, very clearly. You do this step, and if you're getting a certain number correct, you move on to the next one. They want to keep it at a desirable difficulty. So
Right.
the only thinking ahead books are step two and step three. By the time I got through step two, thinking ahead, that's when I got my first serious coach. And Han was fantastic, but he did point out one thing. He was like, "Did you feel like, even though you play good chess, do you feel like you're missing basic things?" Yes, yes, I am.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Um, and it was really a struggle to try and identify what those basic things were because, on one hand, I could do step four tactics, I can do step five tactics. Currently, right now, I can do step six tactics. That's supposed to coordinate with or correlate with a level 2000s. You know,
Yes.
however, that's not what my games look like. Sometimes I get this great little set of tactics. Other times I go for the brilliancy prize and totally screw up a one position.
Right.
Uh, my ex- Going back to the step two, I finished that. Step three is what we worked on. Step three, thinking ahead, has a booklet, but he didn't want me to work on that. And there were no more thinking aheads. I didn't know about Cognitive Chess, the book. I didn't know about Don't Move Until You See It. I didn't know about any of those things. So I never considered it as an option. I didn't know it was that relevant. I hadn't really had the insight until I started writing about it later. And you can look on my chess.com review, I mean, my ratings, and I jumped 150 points before I started working with my coach. And
Yeah.
my coach after that got me up about another 100 points from there, which was amazing. But it didn't until I looked back, I wasn't able to really recognize what was most relevant. And I had tried Manny Rivers style. I had tried every single intensive training technique, this, that, or the other thing, tried to do all these things to get improvement, and found out that really just enabling my mind's ability to process information over the board was the thing that makes me better. And I guess I can put it to you that way. And I strongly suspect, although it's just my story, but I strongly suspect other people would benefit from that.
Yeah. I'm just asking because I mean, can't we just then find other resources than cognitive chess or this step? I mean, thinking ahead. Can't we just then even create our own exercises? Like
Yeah,
using maybe something simple. Would you recommend
Absolutely.
something?
I mean, so Aiden Rayner talks about his own experiences that he just started making audio tapes of
Yes.
openings, right? That's not a bad way to go. If you want to try and learn an opening, record 5 moves in a line and see if you can visualize it, or then later see if you can play it back. There's all sorts of ways in which you can engage this process of trying to make sure that it's up in here. Or another way that GMs will put it is, I don't care what's in your opening files, I care what's up here.
Right.
Ultimately, you're the one that's going to have to understand what to do with the position in front of you. So I look at it like the more you conceptualize, maybe, and I'm just working this out right now, but maybe the more it is that you take ownership, right? This is my chess game, not
Interesting.
your opening, but my opening. Okay, I play this here, or no, the GM tells me to play this. I find people are less committal to things like that until you decide, okay, I'm going to play this way because this last way I didn't like. Like once you start taking ownership of it, the more it becomes personal, the more you retain the information, the more it's got relevancy for you, the more you stick it. The Make It Stick book says this. The Organized
Relevancy.
Mind says this,
Yeah.
right? The stuff I learned about productive failure and about becoming an expert. It's all about sort of generating this reason why you should retain that information and why that particular information is relevant to you.
You have to make it
And it makes it
relevant.
stick. Yeah.
Yeah. Talking about visualization, I think Ramesh, famous Indian coach,
Yeah.
I think one requirement in his coaching lessons is you're not supposed to move the pieces. All the analysis will take place
100%.
without moving the pieces, right? Never move the pieces. Just think through the positions, talk about moves, talk about ideas without ever moving the pieces. That's how he also always does. Of course, his students are probably much stronger than our average Joe, basically, we are talking about. But still, right? That's a system that he establishes. Also, Dan Heisman. If you watch Dan Heisman's YouTube channel,
Yep.
he never moves arrows. He never moves pieces. He only thinks through, talks through the
Yes.
positions,
Yeah, yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I
And then
mean,
he'll show you
it's
at the end
beautiful.
of it. But yeah.
Only
Oh,
at
I
the
mean,
end. Of course, people get bored. People close the video. It's bad for algorithm, probably. Yeah, but that's probably very good for chess
well, okay,
overall.
so it depends on what you want. You want to be entertained, be entertained. But if you want to
Yeah.
get better at chess, then the hard thing, even Jacob Aagaard says this, is you've got to sit in front of a board, not move any piece, and think about what is the best position for my pieces. Where do I want this bishop? Where do I want this knight? That's hard. It's easier just to kind of move for the excitement, but really to play good level chess, you have to think about, okay. Um, for example, my last game, we had opposite side castling. He had pawns on d4 and c4. He had a bishop on g2. Sorry, f3, and I played b5, and I got him to play c5, and
Right.
suddenly now d5 is
Became an outpost.
wide open for my f6 knight.
Yes.
Right? And I occupy it. It attacks his queen. There is a backwards pawn now on d4,
D4. Yes.
right? And just the positional power of having a piece occupying d5 to prevent that pawn from sacrificing itself and being, no longer being a backwards pawn. I occupy d5. He takes my knight with the bishop, and then I take it back with a rook.
Rook.
Game over,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
From there, game over because I can line up rooks on your backwards pawn all day long. You can't support it. It was a great moment, but the only reason that I remember it is because I'm thinking this is a mistake. I didn't expect him to play c5, but I thought, well, if he plays c5, then I've got this outpost. That was a huge mistake, but I retain that. I can
Yeah.
describe it now.
Yes.
If you want to play better chess, it's got to be up in here,
Yes.
not, sort of written down in a note somewhere that you're supposed to remember. You're not gonna.
Yeah.
You have to form a relationship with it. And my experience has been failing first, getting hurt, and then coming back again with the hardest thing for adults to have, the continued faith that I can actually improve, even though there's a lack of evidence so far.
Yeah. We never give up on that. Yeah. What if?
Oh,
What if it happens in the next book, next course?
Uh, I mean,
Yeah.
I thought I thought I'm north of 50 now, and I thought maybe this is just what happens to people north of 50. They just get worse, they just erode. I didn't think I was going to get anywhere, and I've gone from 1750 Lichess to
Mm.
1900
Okay.
over 2 month period of time.
Wow. So it's like something recent, right? That recently happened.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. Yes, in a 2 month period of time. Now, I had peak
Mm.
rating in Lee Chess, just to clarify, was 1983. So
Uh-huh.
I've been higher rated before, but it was a set of habits or things that I do that were really not helping me. And
Mm.
now I think with this visualization stuff that I've been working on, it helps me to not get into overwhelm, not miss obvious threats, not miss mate in ones, and not miss obvious opportunities. Where as long as I play with that intention,
Mm.
I play better. When I default back into distracted or daydreaming or just playing quick, I lose. I lose
Interesting.
to people much lower rated than me.
Right. So this happened when you stopped playing rapid. You're only playing classical these days, right?
Classical, and then that was a change I made months ago, and it wasn't until I started doing either cognitive chess or
Aha.
don't move until you see dot it that I started seeing improvement
So
again.
interesting. So in two different moments in your chess life, after you did
Yes,
visualization work, you saw this sudden jump, basically, like one and a half
100%.
ounce. That's amazing. But because you just talked about outposts, pawn moves, because I keep talking about it. I keep talking about strategic patterns,
Yeah.
chunks, chess crimes, weaknesses, outposts. I created 5 courses about this on
Yeah, no,
Chessable,
your
on
courses are
strategy.
great on those things.
Because that's my whole point, right? You need to get those middle game ideas, chunks, the why questions. Why am I playing like this, right? I try to teach them like deeply engaged, so it comes naturally to them when they're playing those games. So they also notice, for example, when the enemy plays c5, they must notice that there's now a weakness on d5. And to
Hmm.
me, that's the key, right? To play good positional chess, you must be looking at those weaknesses and identifying a weakness relatively quickly, just
I
as you
mean,
did in your game.
I think so. I think I completely agree with that because I've done all the Polgar mates. I've done simple chess. I've done strategy books, but my sense is that you really don't need much in the way of strategy books. You need strategy
Hmm.
books and opening books as references for after your game to kind of go back and go, what does a good move look like after you've tried other
Hmm.
things?
Interesting.
Um, it is human nature to experiment. I've watched a lot of doctors do this. They try to think that they know, and it is human experience. The normal human experience in becoming a doctor is by the end of internship year, year one, you think you know it. You think you've got it. You think you know it. You think this stuff is easy. And by about year two, halfway through year two, you're like, this is not easy.
Hmm.
This is not as easy as I thought it was. And I find it's a similar process with chess. Oh, this is simple. I'm going to move up. Oh, wait, it's not so simple. Okay, well, now I'm going to go back and work on this. Oh, well, it's easy. You keep hitting these new levels. Um,
Hmm.
my my hope is that people will use a productive failure approach to identify what is their biggest, most common mistake and use their limited time to reducing that mistake.
Hmm.
It was written by someone else, not myself, that the nature of chess is a zero sum game. Every mistake I make helps my opponent. Every
Hmm.
mistake my opponent makes helps me. And if I can reduce my mistakes, I'm going to win or at least draw more games.
Yeah.
If I can get my opponent to make more mistakes, I'm going to win more games.
Hmm.
This is where my attention is at now, is trying to
Hmm.
control what I can control, try not to leave a piece hanging, try not to, do something silly, and then try to play solid chess. I'm pretty sure that'll get me far.
Are you right now strong enough to only use the engine to get the right information of why is behind the mistakes? Or do you need a coach, do you think, still? Like,
I prefer coach.
hmm.
Could I go through the engine? I could, but I would generally recommend, and I do this with my analysis, that I not use the engine until later. And I want to see what was my thought. What did I think was good and strong? What did I think the evaluation is? And that's hard for me. I'm not great at evaluation yet. But
Hmm.
at one point, I knew I was just absolutely dominating the game. I had two rooks on the D file. I had I had a queen on f4 protecting my weak f2 or sorry f7 pawn. I was
Mm.
just dominating that board, and I knew it. At that point, I knew it. But do I need a coach? I need a coach to help me with structure.
Mm.
Otherwise, my mind goes crazy, and I think, well, this could work, and that could work, and what about this, and what about that? And
Interesting.
it turns out chess improvement's just about, as my wife likes to call it, the grind.
The
Every day
grind. Yeah.
showing up and doing the grind, right? Every
Consistently
day
grinding. Yeah.
doing the work, right? Not
Yeah.
looking for the next flashy thing, but
Mm.
doing the work of just trying to play solid chess. You know how hard that is to play
So hard.
solid chess?
Yeah.
Why? But it is.
It's one of the hardest, right? I think
Ugh.
that's why we love the game, by the way, because it's so complex, it's so deep, like an ocean. You know, like there are new levels opening up as you grow,
Yes.
like new
Yes.
challenges,
Yeah.
new desirable difficulties, right? That's also great for flow because you enter this flow feeling. You know, it just looks so challenging and so beautiful. I have to like, yeah, you get the motivation from there. Like it's so beautiful. Also, open information game. You know, it's like anybody can make it. The game has so many beautiful sides also. But of course, it's kind of a Buddhistic game as well. You need to accept your mistakes. You just need to, you know, sometimes black and white because you lose, you win. And there's this whole ego direction, as you mentioned as well, that
I
can block.
I I had to switch my attention I mean very on purpose that I didn't want to improve now. I wanted to improve a year from now. So
Mhm.
that what I really wanted to do was go and lose. I wanted to go and tangle with
Interesting.
higher rated people, and I wanted to lose. That was my goal at the beginning of this recent incline. So I
Mhm.
decided I want to be better by August of next year. So starting around August, I started trying to play higher
Wow.
rated players, and I started winning. I don't know. I
Wow.
just play solid chess, try not to make the mistake, and try to take advantage of the mistakes that's there. I got lucky in that respect, but I'm very happy about it. Later, I'll have a different challenge and I'll have to adapt. The same strategy won't work again, but I'll need to
Mm.
be able to identify what is my challenge. Because if my challenge is opening, I need to work on opening. If my challenge is strategy, I need to work on strategy. My talent
Yeah.
is tactics, which it is, then I need to work on tactics and
Yeah.
identifying tactics. Tons of resources there, but unless you know what the one thing is, you're going
Mm.
to get totally distracted by chess videos, chess entertainment complex, chess courses, chess books, chess Twitter, and that's not a small problem for improvers.
Mhm.
I really don't think this is acknowledged enough.
Mm.
Is there is an overwhelm of options all the time being marketed at improvers, and they don't know what they don't know yet. So everything
Yeah.
seems like candy. Everything
Interesting.
seems important.
Because you also maybe in the final phase of our talk, Nick, you also talked to Ben Johnson about this, of course, this whole evidence-based chess learning and some misconceptions and so
Yeah.
on, right? Like what we know from, for example, learning science, make it stick. It looks so counterintuitive, right, at first, but it's actually good. It's actually great for learning. Like for
Yes.
example, interleaving, right? Like this interleaving approach, for example. Like you do a little bit of different things each time of a session, like a little bit of strategy, not too much, and then switch to openings and then some end games, and it looks strange because it looks like you're not getting any better in any skill, and yet,
Meh.
you know,
Think of it like the Mediterranean diet. You got a little of this, you got a little
that
of
that
that, you got to kind of, put it all together and you call it a dinner, right? Whereas if we were
yeah.
to use the food analogy, for whatever reason, traditional teaching is like you will only eat beef until you get
Mm,
the flavor of beef. Like there's no corollary stronger than I can think of than a healthy diet is a diet that is of mixed nutritionist sources. What do you want to do with chess? You want to do a little bit of opening, a little bit of strategy, as you said. You want to interleave. I mean, I used it on my own after the make it stick because all of the stuff that we use to recommend how do people get better at chess is really not chess that they're studying. It's a secondary outcome of how do they learn and acquire and retain information. So it's all based
mhm,
upon learning science, not based upon performance at a game, but just how do humans learn best? And a lot of that is not sticking to just one thing, but doing a bunch of skills all at the same time. And they
mhm,
said this thing in the book very much so that if you're doing it right, if you're interleaving, if you're doing if you're doing desirable difficulty, if you're doing the repetition, spaced repetition, it's
Space
going to
practice,
feel,
yes.
yeah, it's going to feel like you're not retaining enough. But sort of all of a sudden, poof,
Right,
you are.
right.
Um, it's hard for humans to feel that way. They don't have enough feedback, and humans. And I go back to this a lot. I've learned this as a physician. Humans work at the speed of trust. If they don't trust that they're on the right path, they will stray. They will
Right,
go away, right? And
right.
oftentimes, people who are trying to learn chess, if they don't start winning right away, they will lose
Yes,
trust in what they're doing.
yes. It happens all the
Yeah,
time also to me as a
yeah.
coach. I know it. Yep,
But
yep.
if you set expectations like we're going to get you better a year from now, the way we're going to do that is you're going to play, we're going to learn where your blocks are, and then I'm going to help you through it. I won't quit on you. We're going to help you through this. We're going to help you through this primary block. Then you
Right.
start to establish a relationship where people will maybe trust in you. As a physician, I have to do this a lot. It's not like people don't know that smoking's bad for them. It's not like they're surprised when I tell them that smoking is bad for them. It's not knowledge that they lack. It's a relevancy of why they should pay attention to the information at all. And if
Mm,
I'm a caring person, if I connect with them, if I'm able to convince them that I care about what happens to you, suddenly that information becomes a lot more relevant. That's just how
right.
people work. We're emotions first, logic second.
Yeah.
It is not any different with chess.
Unfortunately, right? So that's why these counterintuitive approaches that actually evidence-based is actually
Yeah.
kind of counterintuitive to human nature in some sense. And people still there's also this whole J-shaped curve to skill development. When you learn something new, for example, usually performance drops and then goes higher, right? Hence the J, like a J, right? So when people go a little bit down in their rating, then they think, okay, they're
Oh
going
my
in the
God.
wrong direction.
My last 2 years were the down on the J. I'm not gonna lie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And many
Um,
people like don't even see the upper hand and just quit. So yeah, so it's huge. So it's good to be also intentional about this. Yeah, just to tell students that this is actually backed up by science and openness from the teacher side as
yeah.
well to
Just
share
change
with
their
students.
framework. Look, you're gonna improve, but it's gonna be a year from now.
Yeah.
And if you're okay to do this for a year, I'm your person, right? We're going to get there.
Right.
I'm going to get you 100 to 200 points better within a year's time. And it's going to
Right.
come, bam, all of a sudden when you finally get it. But
Yeah.
it's I think engendering that trust in people that yes, it will get there. It's just say my experience. Folks from say India or my family's an immigrant family, so my folk, immigrants have a tendency to be hyper focused on education. You will make your way through
Yeah.
education. And I can just imagine that if somebody said, you kid are going to make your way by being good at chess, that hyper focus and that trust that one day this will deliver, people
Yeah.
commit to it. And I feel like chess coaches would do better if it's not knowledge that they really focus in on, but sort of engender a relationship where people will learn on their own. We're here to be the guide, if you will. I'm on the journey with you.
Yeah.
I'm here with you for all the losses and the ups and the downs. I feel like that kind of ends up working better because knowledge, man, I can find YouTube, I can find books, I
You
can
can get
find
it.
AIs, right? What do humans offer other humans better than anything else is relationships and connection.
It's so lovely to hear your words. I mean, also like I have some group lessons, I see so many students, and this is so I also talked to Solvay about this like recently, right? Like this bring this relationship of welcoming our mistakes and talking with the other guys in a group, that people are openly talking about their mistakes, their losses, and they gain feedback from the peers, and we talk and we try to solve, we identify the problems, then I fetch interesting positions, training game positions this time, productive failure, hands-on approach. I'm giving them a chance to play simultaneous games against me, right? I'm not spoon feeding
Wow.
information to them. Actually, that's why I'm making those YouTube videos are totally done to help to give the knowledge to my students as well, right?
Yep.
I'm asking them just to go to YouTube and watch the videos. But when you come to my class, we will be doing some real work. Like I will be actively testing you either by playing simuls or just solving some challenging puzzles or about your particular weakness that I identify or we identified together. Then I'm giving those positions to you that we are playing together. And I've seen results myself. I think a video is
Yeah.
coming soon. Like it's an incredible feeling as a coach when this happens, when students break some barriers. Like I have so many students that they are too shy, they don't want to sacrifice, and then after a month of playing, the guy just crushed me recently in an attacking game, for example. Yeah, it's just an
I mean,
amazing feeling.
I love the way that your courses and your videos really focus in on the short, narrowed, thinking one and a half moves or three moves down, your move, my move, your move, that kind of calculation.
Mhm.
And then also, look, let's not trap your bishop. Let's open up your bishop. Let's
Yeah.
not, develop your opponent's pieces. Let's develop your pieces.
Mm.
You're not thinking like, how do I win the game? It's more like, okay,
Mini
how do I make
plans.
my, yes, mini plans.
Yes.
When you go and you ask, I'm a fan of football. When you go and you ask Nick Saban, who is a famous football coach here in the United States with a string of successes at a college program called Alabama, his focus was always don't try and win the game. Try and be really good at what you're doing. Focus in on running five steps and then really making that move or grounding your blocks. Like you focus on what you can control.
Yeah.
Uh, that's how people get successful is on the skill side. They really get
Right.
everybody to focus in on what is theirs to control.
To finish it up, I can show you some positions, maybe one or two. Actually, that
Okay.
actually connects to what we were discussing today of mini plans and some basic visualizations. Can you see my screen right now? Can you see
I
it's white to
can.
play?
Yeah. It's
Yes.
a white knight versus a black
Yeah, that's actually a
bishop.
perfect illustration of what you just mentioned, Nick. Those small operations, mini plans, and also basic visualization and even conceptualization, I think, in this case. So this position will actually highlight what we discussed today. White to play, what would you play as white in this position? Please stop the
Man.
video, my friends, on YouTube. I'm testing
Well,
Nick right now.
so you've got a dark squared bishop that is being blocked in by its dark squared pawns, and that makes me want to play b5 here.
Yes?
Um, if b5, then c takes b, and I think then you can play knight to d5, threaten the bishop, and then take back with the c pawn,
Yes?
blocking that dark squared pawn on d6 forever. Um, that would be one thing I would think about, and the other because I make sure that I'm always comparing two moves before I move. If I don't, I forget things. So the other thing would be whether or
Okay.
not a4 is helpful. Um, that's about what I think of. So I would
Yeah.
have a hard time not playing b5. I'd
Yes.
probably end up playing b5.
Beautiful. B5 is the correct solution. What you're doing is that you're awakening your knight. Yeah, you're creating a weakness. In fact, you're creating an outpost square for your knight by undermining that pawn that is lacking support. Right?
Yeah.
If this b6 pawn would be on b7, your b5 would not be so effective because if you take on c6, they will just recapture with the pawn, and your knight would not gain access to this d5 outpost. So that's a chess chunk, a strategic chess chunk from this very pawn structure. You notice that b5 actually gives this beautiful square for your knight. And you're
Yeah.
creating a good knight versus bad bishop scenario. Next move is knight d5, let's say. And you're basically completely, or maybe you can even start with knight d5 as you mentioned, right? You mentioned this move, for example, bishop
Yeah.
d8 then takes. And now we achieved a beautiful chunk that we already know before, right? That was
Yeah.
my point. Like this chunks should be learned, important chunks, recurrent middle game chunks. For example, good knight versus bad bishop should be learned deeply. You
Oh.
should know also why this is a good position for
Oh.
white, right?
Yeah. Knight b4, and then knight to c6 is just dominating.
One of those ideas, yeah? Because once you get a beautiful knight on d5 like that, then you also have other ideas like this, as you mentioned, right? You take it from there. You can improve even
Yeah.
further from this position. Just look at the effect of this b5 move into the position, right? That's what I talk about in my YouTube video. Just how do you make this miserable knight happy? This knight is miserable right now, yeah, crying. This c6 pawn is dominating that knight completely, right? You should be observing these situations. Once you
I mean,
see it, you play it.
you are far better than I am, so take this with a grain of salt. But whenever I do these things, I have to think about what is the weakest unsupported piece, and then how do I attack it? and that
Yes,
kind of led me to I'd like the knight on d5. I'd like to block off the bishop, but also the undefended c6 pawn
exactly.
is something that you can attack, and
Yes,
black has to do
has to
something about
react
it.
to it.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
forcing moves first are a really helpful way to kind of think about things.
Yeah, yeah. So this would this be because that's a three-ply calculation if you think about it. That's a very minimal calculation that involves visualization, right? Without moving the pieces, of course. We are supposed to do this without moving the pieces.
Yeah,
So b5, cb5, cb5, let's say, we evaluate at that moment. Knight d5 is coming and we can stop at that moment, yeah? By all means.
yeah.
You don't need to calculate 10 moves in depth in that moment. You reach your mini plan, you reach your goal. But that goal, to my mind, should be studied first in some sense, right? Like in terms of chess patterns and chunks, right? Like this dream state we are talking about. Why is it such a dream state for white? Why is this knight a better piece than the bishop, for example?
That's
So that's what
fair. I
I,
mean, I wouldn't
yeah.
know that. I wouldn't know that if I hadn't lost a few games where my minor
Hmm.
piece was worse than the other person's minor piece. And really getting a sense of what that strategy means, because I can read in Simple Chess or some of these strategy books, that the quality of the minor piece will dictate whether or not you're going to win. Well, what does that
Hmm.
look like? You've got a bishop that is stuck, very unhappy bishop.
Yes.
It can run up and down that h4 to d8 diagonal, but that's about it. And if you really wanted to, as a further cementing move, white just kind of like starts to move those pawns onto some dark squares to limit the activity. And sooner or later, black runs out of good moves,
Hmm.
right? That is the advantage, I suppose, in some respects. But until you actually play that game,
Hmm.
it doesn't become obvious to you. It wouldn't have been obvious for
Yes.
me if I hadn't have
Yes.
actually lost a few of those
Agree,
games.
agree. So we should actually give some training games to our students from such positions that they are supposed
Yeah,
to convert an advantage like this. It becomes experiential once we do that.
yeah.
And that's also what I'm doing in my group lessons, right? I take a position like this, sometimes an extra material, sometimes converting a positional advantage. I let them play it against me or themselves, for example. That's so important also to consolidate this knowledge, to make it relevant, as you mentioned, right? To make it personal,
Yes.
basically. That's what you're supposed to do. Absolutely. It all
Yeah.
comes together in a single exercise like that, right? And you learn
Yay.
something together. Yeah. One more. Okay, I'm now testing your endgame chunks and pattern knowledge. Black to play. It's a Fischer game. Fischer with black pieces. What do you think Fischer played in this position? Can you formulate a winning plan for black?
Well, you've got, I like the fact that you're in opposition. Your C4 king is blocking the C2 king from really getting close. You don't really need to do anything, at least it looks like, on the A and the B files just yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how do you close down the opposite side so that white doesn't really have any options other than to play a crappy move?
Mm.
I'm looking at H5. I'm looking at B5. I'm looking at um, B6, but I'm thinking H5. I don't know what white does after H5.
So you want to
Um,
play for Zugzwang. So let's say they have no moves left, f4, and let's say you play g6. That's your
yep,
plan, right? You're playing for
yep.
Zugzwang. You think that if the king has to move, then you're winning this game. That's your conclusion, basically, right? That's more or less what
Um,
you're coming from.
I think you can get the king with an isolated pawn, and then now that you've got this position,
Hmm.
now you can clarify the queen, I mean the king side, the A and the B file. You can play B6, you can play A5, you can trade, or you can push, you can get a passed pawn, and that'll win you the game.
Interesting. So you now your plan is changed. You don't want to win because of Zugzwang patterns or position,
No.
or you want to create a pass pawn and win on the
Uh,
queen side.
and once you're
Interesting.
there, yeah, once you're there, even if white gets all of those pawns and you trade them off, you are now closer to the king side, and you can now run over and just eat them all.
Interesting. I think now you formulate a winning plan. I think you got the right answer, but you don't need those h5 moves, right? You told me the
Okay.
right answer. You want to play b6 followed by a5. That's the cleanest winning plan, and Fischer played like that. Why?
Yeah.
Because let's say white waits or some random move. What is this endgame chunk? Do you know this? Have you studied this chunk before? If you look at this pawn distribution, do you know what's this called, for example? The pawn structure
I
is not
don't.
symmetrical.
I've gone
Aha.
through Silman's endgames, but I know that at this point, now that you've got the passed a pawn, you
Right.
just push that thing, and that
Right.
king, right? That
Decoy.
king has to respond. Yes.
Yes. The pawn serves like a decoy. It's called the outside pass pawn, right? An outside pass pawn, all that's being equal, is a decisive advantage in a pawn endgame. For the same reason, because the king needs to go to Siberia to deal with this pawn, and
Yeah.
your king will collect everything on the other side. I think
And run on
Silman
back.
calls this, like a fox in a chicken coop,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
king enters, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, of course, Fischer knows this pattern before. So that's what I'm talking about. This is an endgame chunk that we know the evaluation.
To be fair, Fisher knew a lot of patterns.
Of course. But
Yeah.
it's not impossible, even for intermediate players, I think, to see this from this position. Once they deeply engage with why this is a winning position for black, they have a dream state. They are forming a dream state. Just like good knight versus bad bishop on the previous example. Yeah, they're learning a dream state with a certain evaluation and why that evaluation is there, for example. If you
So
know
I have
that,
to remember. No,
yeah,
go ahead.
because if you know that, the whole calculation process becomes much more efficient, right? Because then you instantly see those patterns relatively quickly in those pawn structures, basically, right?
I'll agree with you and disagree with you. So I'll agree with you that this is absolutely a great example of that chunk and a great example of getting that sort of passed pawn. But if you don't understand the power of opposition in the end game, it's kind of silly because you have to be able to see, all right, that king has to now run over to take take care of the a pawn, and now my king can run over and get the other pawns. It is. I have to say, the Stillman Endgame is probably the most useful book I think I've ever read in all of chess. But if you forget the opposition, say here, White plays b5, and the the amateur goes, "Okay, I'll collect the free pawn."
But that doesn't
That
matter, yeah, because black has an extra pawn right now, and black will win with an extra pawn. That
okay,
that's even easier. With an extra pawn, you win a pawn endgame. Also, in most cases, Nick, outside pass pawn defeats king's activity. I can give you so
yeah.
many examples that one side is a much more active king. I have an outside pass pawn, I win. Right? That's what I
Mhm.
mean. Outside pass pawn usually defeats king's activity in a pawn endgame because inevitably the opponent king needs to go to Siberia to deal with an outside pass pawn. So black wins not because of the opposition right now, actually. The king can also be maybe some other square. Then you still win if you create this outside pass pawn, for example.
I
And that,
trust you. You
yes,
are a higher rated player than I am, so
yes.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I already showed this to you, like some of students from last week. So I have some examples on that. But
Sure.
the point remains the same. To me, this is also part of, what makes the whole process efficient. Knowing those patterns and chunks that are important, that can actually aid the whole process of the whole visualization and direction of thinking, basically, in chess
Okay.
positions. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit too complex. Also for beginners, yeah, they can get overwhelmed in random calculations, basically. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, we
No,
discussed
no,
so many
I
things.
thank you for giving me the opportunity and thank you for what you do. I think your courses are fascinating and interesting. I think your approach is interesting. And happy to help out whatever way I can. But best of luck
I,
to you and your
I
students.
think we'll meet again because I'm just starting this podcast format. You're my fourth or fifth guest. I forgot. So this will probably go on, across the years. I would love to also become a better coach by talking to people, by learning new things from people. That's the only way, right, to grow, basically. Accepting our limitations, also showing our strengths, looking at our strengths and weaknesses. As you mentioned, I'm always happy to talk to people. I'll probably talk to Aidan Rainer very, very soon as well about this
Please do.
conceptualization part.
Yeah,
Yeah, super
I look
interesting.
forward to that.
Also, let us know about your progress once you do more of this kind of work. I will be watching your blog. It's called Chess in Small Doses. All of you guys, I will post a link here on this video description. Please subscribe.
But I will be,
Yes,
with your permission, I will be posting a link to this podcast on my Substack.
absolutely.
Uh,
Please do that. Thank you so much for everything and wishing you all the best. Please, guys, if you like the video, please give us feedback. What you thought about today's episode? Does it resonate with you? Do any of you guys also get better after some hardcore visualization work as Nick did? We are expecting your feedback on YouTube,
oh, I
okay?
don't want to stay hardcore. It was like 10 minutes a day.
10
10
minutes a
minutes a
day.
day.
That's even
Seriously.
nicer. Okay.
Yes.
That's easy. Well,
Yeah,
go
yeah,
for
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. See you very soon, Nick. Thank you so much for today again. And I will
All
catch
right,
you
take
very
care.
soon.